Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Gabby Coe. She's an engineer, podcaster, and her podcast is called Key to the Future. I was a guest on there. I was really happy to be a guest on there. And I'm really interested to learn more about her journey, especially about her podcast and how she got to where she is today in terms of her career. So welcome to the Teach the Geek interviews, Gabby.
Oh, well, hi. Thank you so much for having me on, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you today.
Wonderful. So for the bit of research I did on you, Gabby, I saw you studied industrial engineering. So what was the motivation to study that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I was in high school, I was really good in math, and I didn't really know what I was going to do right with after high school. But I actually started thinking about being a lawyer. But being a lawyer meant to me that you had to really get in front of a group and possibly defend someone, right? And so that thought really scared me. But then I had conversations with my high school advisor who said, "Hey, why don't you take an aptitude test and see what it tells us?" And so I did. And of course, that test told me, or I guess that data showed me that I was good at math, which I kind of knew, I guess. But I could be I guess I could consider a field in, a career in engineering. And so, but then engineering, right? There's so many types of engineering. So I didn't really know, but which engineering I would do. But I started to do some research, and industrial engineering kind of caught my eye because I've always been very process oriented, if you will, and trying to do things a little bit better than what we are doing them now. And so that really spoke to me. And I went down that path. And then that led me to really looking at systems engineering later on as later on in my career when I went to get a master's degree in systems engineering, which went both degrees kind of went together. Systems engineering is really more about having that vision for the product, having that vision of where you're going to go. Think about it as in terms of um, putting together a puzzle, right? When you're putting together a puzzle, you're thinking about, you have a picture of the end game, what that picture is going to look like. And so you take the different pieces that need to go together. And so in systems engineering, we have an idea of what we want the solution to be, the end solution to be, and then what components we need to put together in order to make that solution an effective solution for our customers or for what that problem we're trying to solve. So that really spoke to me in terms of having that big picture, and helping bring the components together, not only the physical components together, but the people that bring them together, right? All the different disciplines that we need to consider in the problem space when we're trying to solve a problem for the customer.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you get these degrees first in industrial and systems engineering. What type of work did you do once you were done school?
Right. So I started my career as an Army officer in the Army Corps of Engineers, where I led a team, a platoon, right? A team of about 30 people, men and women, where our mission was to do rapid runway repair. So talk about process. That is a process that needs to, the rapid runway repair was part of our wartime mission, which we as engineers would go to say, repair for the Air Force, repair a runway that had been bombed or needed repair so that they can land the missions on a timely manner and so on. And so we practiced this, right? This was during our non-wartime. This was our wartime mission, but we needed to practice in order to make sure that we had the process down. And so that's being really process oriented, right? I gathered the team. We trained about how to do the rapid runway repair, which involved heavy equipment, involved materials to lay down after we clear the crater, for example, and then lay down the material that would harden at a certain length of time, so that then sorties could take could take place, so that the Air Force could do their missions as well. So then after that, after I left the service, I went to work for Northrop Grumman, and I started there as a T1, T2, which is the very entry level um, engineer, and had the opportunities that took me from supporting projects for the Department of Defense, federal and civilian agencies, also state and local governments, as well as to foreign governments, the United Kingdom and Colombia. So, I've had the gamut, if you will, of systems engineering positions and leadership positions and across the life cycle, from requirements management at the very start to fielding a product and operating and sustaining it.
With the roles that you've taken on throughout your career, Gabby, are those roles that you actively look to get, or did it kind of just unfold that way?
Well, I could tell you that some of them kind of unfolded in a way. Others I kind of went after, and I tell you that because when I was a early career engineer, I was really focused on doing a good job and just keeping my head down, doing a good job, doing what was asked of me, and also actually going beyond that. Right, I always kind of volunteered to do some things that maybe others would shy away from doing. And so that kind of got me a little bit of visibility as to what I could do. And if I didn't know how to solve something, I was going to figure it out by asking others how they experience what experiences they had with that particular problem, and getting their input so that I would then inform myself and then devise a path forward. So some of the things that I did, or some of the leadership positions I got, was because I kind of brought it upon myself, if you will, to take on those hardest tasks, and then got the visibility that then people, other my managers and leaders, took notice, like, and later on led to other opportunities and possibilities.
How do you go about seeking these opportunities by gaining the visibility while still being able to do the job that you have? I often get the sense that you don't want to overburden yourself, and which can lead to overwhelm. So I'm just curious how you were able to balance that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that there is, you have to kind of come out of your comfort zone in order for you to grow. And so there is, I often tell folks that seek my mentorship, is when you're in a new job. The first year, you're really learning about that job, how to do that job, what you can do, and to progress it, right? The second year, you're kind of like, okay, I got this. I think I can improve it by doing these other things, right? Then the third year, you're kind of like, I'm I think that I've done this already. I've done everything that I can do, and I've progressed it to a good place. And then you kind of start thinking about, well, what else can I do? And not so much to do so many things at the same time and overwhelm yourself, right? But as you progress in that position, or that original position that you have, or original assignment, then you got to start thinking about what else you can do. And the way that I viewed it is, okay, I came to this job, that I got this one job. I learned it the first year. I improved it the second year. The following year, then I'm kind of ready to, like, maybe improve it a little more. Or in that whole period of time, I've taught others how to do the job, or mentored others in that job. And then by the fourth year, you're really kind of ready to move on and learn something new that will allow you to step up, right, to the next level. And sometimes that comes about because there's a problem that needs fixing. And if you kind of, like, say, raise your hand, hey, I'm interested in helping out in that, then that kind of gets you that visibility. I'm not suggesting, to overwhelm yourself, because then that's not effective either, right? So I think it's just kind of like looking at your current assignment and seeing where you are, what else you could be doing, and learning. Because as long as you're learning, then you're progressing. You can get to the next level. But if you kind of like doing the same thing over and over, and you're feeling like, wow, I'm bored, then that should give you a clue that it's time to look for the next thing and look for the next challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever been a manager of people, Gabby?
I have. I was like I mentioned, I started my career as a T1, right, which is like the very entry level technical engineer at Northrop Grumman, and I think it's the same way in the industry. But then by the time I got to T4, which was kind of like the middle, there were some opportunities where management was in the horizon, right, and there was opportunities that I could um, take as a manager. And so I decided, let me take this path and try it out and see if I like to do that. And I did that. I did for M1 and an M2 level, which is like, the first two levels. And then I decided, well, this has been really helpful for me in understanding what managers are requesting, right? Why are they asking for the data that they're asking at some point? Um, but it's really not what I want to do. I want to really go back to being a technical performer and help find the solutions and innovate the solutions that our customers need, be closer to that space. And so then I made the transition back to the T-band, which is where I stayed and have been for a while now.
When it comes to being a manager of people, what do you think are the primary skills you need to have to take on that type of role?
Yeah, that I think that's a good question. And I think, it really comes down to being a good listener and also have empathy, but also be a good leader, be able to take the people's input to make the decisions that you need to make as a manager, right? But in order to take that input, you need to put yourself in the people that you manage in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, understand their needs, understand how they can contribute to the overall team effort, right? And how do you do that is by getting to know the individual down to the individual level. You may have a team of a lot of people, 10 and other, like 10, 15 people, but it's important to take the time aside to get to know the people at an individual level, listen to them, right? So that you are able to understand what makes them tick and how the different people work together, bring them together to be able to accomplish the mission. I think it's important to listen and to have that empathy as well. And because then, they understand that you can walk a mile in their shoes, if you will. But when the rubber hits the road, when it's time to accomplish that mission, they will have your back as a manager because you have been there for them. So I think it's important to listen, be empathetic, but also display the leadership roles, the leadership attributes, right? That you need to accomplish the mission.
Do you think that leaders should have a leadership style, or should they lead based on how others want to be led?
I think I think you should have your own leadership style, because the style that you choose, it should be empathetic. And I think by choosing that style, right, choosing your style and being empathetic and listening, then things will fall into place. You would be able to bring people into the fold of what you need to do, accomplish that mission. Because then, like I said before, they will understand that you are there to listen to them, take in their input, be a collaborative part of what they're doing, and then you may have the decisions to be made, but you have taken their input, and that's what makes people feel like, okay, I was part of it, I contributed, I made said my piece, right? And perhaps things did not go the way I suggested or recommended, but at least that leader listened to me and took that into account. And I think that part speaks volumes for a leader.
Nice. I mentioned in the intro that you have a podcast as well, Keys to the Future. What was the motivation for you starting it, and what do you hope people get from it?
Oh, thank you so much for asking me that question, because the podcast Keys to the Future, I started it because I was going through a grieving process myself, and that I lost my brother, who was the greatest mentor that I've had in my life. He was older than me, and he was really showing me the ropes all throughout my life, as a kid, as a child, as a teen, and then into my adulthood. So when I lost my brother, there was a big gap. There was a big gap for me, and I started to think about how can I take this really impactful thing in my life and make it a positive. And like I said, he was a great mentor. He and I talked about everything and nothing. And every time I talked to him, I came out of that conversation feeling like, okay, yeah, I can do this. If I wasn't, if I was feeling down on myself that I was having a challenge that I couldn't resolve, or, I came out with a joke that I learned that I would then repeat to others. And, it was just that kind of conversation that we always had going on throughout our lives. And so I felt that one of the positives that I could do was kind of provide my knowledge to others, right? To navigate their careers, but not really just my knowledge, is having those conversations like you and I are doing right now with the guests, right? Inviting other folks that have walked that mile in the career path that you may want, because then you the person that's listening can then make their own decisions about what to do next. And my hopes is that, if even if just one person out of all the episodes that I have out there, even if just one person takes that step forward for themselves, right? That says, wow, this guest went through this much, and this is how they navigated their career. This is how they came out on the other side. I can do it. Let me go and talk to other people that can help me and build that community. If just one person does that, to me, I've accomplished my mission, and I've helped somebody go forward instead of staying in where they are, wondering, should I, could I, would I, you know?
Yeah, that's a noble mission. I'm glad that you started the podcast to push that mission forward.
Thank
Gabby,
you.
I started this podcast. The mission of me starting this podcast was to learn about the public speaking journeys of those with technical backgrounds, those who've had technical roles. And it really all started with myself having to give presentations in front of management and not being all that great at it, but getting better at it over time because I saw the benefit of doing so. So I'm curious to learn whether speaking in front of others, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like I said in the beginning, I had at first, when I was in high school, thought I'll being a lawyer, right? But when I discovered that, what a lawyer meant, being a lawyer meant, and like speaking in front of people and defending people or defending certain things, or that just terrified me. So I didn't go that route, obviously. And but I think that as an engineer, I've always been, or consider myself to be, an introvert. And I take more of the approach of observing the room, reading the room first, and then analyzing in my mind what's being said, right? And then maybe speaking up. And that's good. That's a good way to analyze and take it all in. But there are some times that you can't really wait and just sit there and not do anything. But I think it's important as engineers to be able to be comfortable with speaking in public, with speaking with others, right? Because one, you need to make sure that you're able to explain what the solution that you're bringing forward to that problem space that you may be working in. What is that solution, right? You need to communicate that. Unless you communicate it, then you're going to sit in the background and somebody else may come up with the same idea, and be able to communicate it, right? And it's not so much that it's like you gotta, you gotta outdo the other person. It's just that you need to be able to communicate it, explain the product. How are people going to use the product that you're working on or that innovation that you brought forward, right? That it may change the world. But if you don't know how to explain it to folks, then they may not be interested. So I think it's important for us engineers to develop those skills. They're not intuitive, I think, if you will. And I love your podcast because it has a lot of tips that you can use. For example, being prepared, um, do your homework, right? You have to for a presentation, you have to be able to know your audience. Are you talking to executives? Are you talking to who want to know data, right? And what is the impact to the business of what it is that you're presenting? Are you talking to other engineers who are going to geek out and want to know the nth degree of the solution that you're presenting, right? Or are you talking to maybe potential customers who could use the product that you have? And if you don't know how to explain it, then they walk away without knowing the benefits of that product, right? So I think being prepared, knowing your audience is important, so that then you can go to the different levels of what things to explain, right? And then practice. There's a thing that says practice makes perfect. Well, it doesn't make us perfect, but it makes us more comfortable in with the data, with the topic that we are presenting. And so maybe practice out loud with your friends or friendly faces, right? With your family or some colleagues initially. Make sure that time yourself, right? Because you want to be respectful of the time. If you're briefing executives, for example, you don't want to just ramble on. Make sure that, so you want to time yourself because you want to make sure that you have enough time to cover the topic that you want to cover and the takeaways that you really want to bring home. Then have the mindset of, hey, I can do this, right? Build that confidence, because if you have prepared, then if you've done your homework, then just go over there and present away. So have that confidence, and you can build that confidence by preparing, practicing, and so on. And then the last thing I would say is ask for feedback, because that's the only way that how that would help you improve. Ask for that feedback, specific feedback on how did you do? What is there anything else that I could have done better, and so on, right? But also observe how others do their presentations, and maybe there's some things that you may want to emulate from there. Maybe there are some things that you don't want to emulate, but observe others or listen to, like TED Talks. There's a TED Talk on how to do TED Talks, right? And there are books out there as well. There is your podcast and all of the materials that you have put forward to help us just step out of our comfort zone and do it. And the more that you present and the more that you talk to others, the easier it becomes.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation, Gabby. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Neil. I am on LinkedIn. I'm also, my podcast is also Keys to the Future on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And yeah, and there's a website also that I have. I can provide you the link where people can reach out to me. But if you want to reach out to me, LinkedIn it's a good way to do that.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Gabby.
Bye.